فكلي واشربي وقري عينا فإما ترين من البشر أحدا فقولي إني نذرت للرحمن صوما.
Hey everyone, assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Islamic Mary podcast. So for today, I want to speak about a talk I recently gave at the Pacific Northeast Virtual Exchange Conference. And there I spoke about my forthcoming book on the Islamic Mary, Maryam through the centuries, and how it connects with my virtual exchange and COIL work. So virtual exchange is a means to use technology to connect young people throughout the world. It often focuses on the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and two professors creating a module in their class regarding the course content. So in the presentation, I spoke about how I belong to the 9/11 generation. It was a generation that grew up in the 1990s, but came of age in the early 2000s, and witnessed war, conflict, and religious misunderstanding. I remember being a boy when the Persian Gulf War started, the first images of war being broadcast on cable news. And I remember as a young child watching CNN. This was the moment that CNN became a household name and people watching those images of war. I participated in rallies to end the genocide in Bosnia and help Bosnian refugees relocate here in the United States. And I was a student at Georgetown when 9/11 happened and felt the impact of the event on my life and career. So during this time in the 1990s, there was this renewed emphasis on the clash of civilization. And this was a thesis developed by Samuel Huntington, where he declared in 1993 that one of the next threats after the fall of communism would be the green threat instead of the communist red one. According to Huntington, the next conflicts would be between civilizations with similar histories, cultures, and religions. He believed that the next world war, if there is one, will be a war between civilizations. In this new world, it would be the West versus the rest, and that Western civilization needed to bond together and quell internal strife to thwart external threats and nemesis. Within this scheme, Islam had its own civilization and provided a potential threat to the West, alongside the Confucian civilization of China. As he famously declared, Islam has bloody borders, and there was historic and intrinsic conflict between Islam and the West. But a counter-narrative developed, arguing that conflict between Islam and the West was not inevitable, and that the various civilizations or religions could live in peace and coexistence. This narrative built upon previous intellectual efforts that saw Ibrahim as a common figure between Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and could unite the various religious traditions in an age of war and conflict. The great religions shared different ideas, such as monotheism, scripture, and ethics, and overlapped in terms of values and cultures. Some even suggested that the modern conflicts were akin to a family feud or a sibling rivalry, as the different religions returned to the same father, Abraham, and were part of a larger family. However, a series of books emerged critiquing this notion of Abraham and how he was portrayed in the public discourse, interfaith, and interreligious circles. The authors admitted that Abraham was shared between the different religions, but they understood him in different ways and within their own theology and religious understanding. The various attempts at Abrahamic religions often glossed over these differences and at times suggested creating a new religion rather than respecting the multiple traditions and their unique histories. While global peace and understanding between world religions is a noble idea, creating a neutral Abraham could do more harm than good and potentially generate more misunderstanding and mistrust. Whereas the term Abrahamic still holds currency, new books have emerged discussing the Islamic Mary or Maryam. These new books build upon the ecumenical spirit of the early discussion on Abraham, but highlight a new figure that opens innovative possibilities regarding Christian-Muslim relations, spirituality, and women and religion. While Abraham represents the classic patriarch, with his sons Ishmael, Ismail, Ishaq, Isaac fathering the great religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, Maryam represents a woman, a mother, and a spiritual figure who has inspired millions throughout the centuries. The emphasis on Maryam also highlights the importance of Christian-Muslim relations in the world today and in the future. According to a Pew poll, Christians and Muslims will roughly be the same number by 2050 and make up over half of the world's population. As the 2007 A Common World Letter begins, without peace and justice between the two religious communities, there can be no meaningful peace in the world. The future of the world depends on peace between Christians and Muslims. In other words, international peace is highly dependent on peace between Christians and Muslims, and their interaction will have global consequences. Yet the scholarly emphasis on Maryam is aware of the critiques made against Abraham in Abrahamic religions, and largely avoids trying to create a neutral Mary, but seeks to better understand how she operates in the different religions. My scholarship on the Islamic Mary is very much connected to my day job, where I am the director of the Brzezinski Institute for Global Virtual Learning. And the Institute collaborates with institutions of higher education around the world to explore the similarities and differences in their missions and practices, to understand the challenges that they face, and to create solutions in light of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Now, the Brzezinski project, now the Brzezinski Institute, emerged out of a post 9/11 climate of fear and mistrust between Islam and the West. After the tragic day of 9/11, Dr. Jamal Brzezinski, which is the institute is named after, participated in various meetings with government and political leaders to help explain Islam as a religion was not the source of the attacks. I personally remember Dr. Brzezinski giving a Friday sermon, khutbah, shortly after 9/11, explaining the true essence of Islam, which was recorded by major media stations like CNN. Dr. Brzezinski would eventually meet with then President George W. Bush to help articulate America's stance that it was not a war against Islam. To help further clear this misunderstanding, Dr. Brzezinski and the International Institute of Islamic Thought, IIIT, worked with various universities to endow chairs of Islamic studies and programs of interfaith understanding, such as ones at George Mason University and Harvard Seminary. Dr. Brzezinski was the president of IIIT at the time and was adamant about investing more resources in the United States and with mainstream educational institutions, organizations, especially those in higher education. The 9/11 attacks fueled an already strong movement of Islamophobia, which continued to gain momentum in the years ahead. Despite the tremendous efforts of Muslim American organizations to better explain Islam and communities, large portions of Americans continue to harbor fear and mistrust of Muslims, mainly because they relied on media and entertainment for their information. A key factor of whether a person has Islamophobic views is whether they ever had met a Muslim, which many Americans never had. This Islamophobia movement reached a climax with the election of the then President Donald Trump, who campaigned on the Muslim ban, which specifically targeted Muslims, especially those from Muslim majority countries. In many ways, the Muslim ban represented the opposite of what Dr. Brzezinski advocated, such as a belief in harmonious relationships between America and Muslim majority countries, a global understanding of the world, and a higher education as a means for social transformation. So to conclude, as I look back and reflect on my scholarship, as well as my virtual exchange and COIL work, I see there's certain themes. First, there's this idea of the clash of civilizations. That growing up in the 1990s, there was this idea that Islam and the West were inevitably going to collide, and that there would be war and conflict. However, I see myself as part of this counter movement that sees that peaceful coexistence is possible, and America can learn from the rest of the world, and the rest of the world can learn from America and the American experience. As an American myself, being born here, growing up, going to American universities, I've traveled and lived abroad in the Middle East, visited Southeast Asia, been to Europe and North Africa, and see that there's so many things in common and so many things we can build upon to live in a more just and pluralistic world. There's also the shared idea of figures. So we see within my scholarship that we can find commonalities, whether that be of Abraham, Ibrahim, or Mary, Maryam. And also in my virtual exchange and global exchange work, part of our efforts is to focus on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So part of our work is to find common initiatives and goals. For instance, we had a Zero Hunger project here in the United States in Winchester, Virginia, where we did surveys of different food banks and found that our local food banks are in need of fresh fruits and vegetables to serve the local populations. And we actually developed a food pantry here at Shenandoah University where students can come and take food so they can focus on their studies and their classes. And at the same time, we did a relationship between Shenandoah University on the idea of hunger with Yarmouk University in Jordan. And at the university, we also looked at local food banks and found that they needed more protein and meat. And because of their study and research, it was actually adopted by the Jordanian government to help fight poverty. So we see that two universities, hundreds of miles apart, one here in America and the other in the Middle East, are working on these joint projects of how to fight hunger, and at the same time trying to find ways where we can learn from each other on a common issue and problem. And lastly, we see the development of the Brzezinski Institute. And the Brzezinski Institute in many ways represents the legacy of Jamal Brzezinski, who was someone who grew up in Iraq, studied the United Kingdom, and became an American citizen. And through his efforts here in the United States, he developed interfaith initiatives, tried to better explain Islam to the American populations, also organized various programs on hunger and social service. And he was someone that really believed that Islam and the West could coexist and that there needs to be more efforts towards mutual understanding and religious literacy. So through these different efforts, whether it's my research or through my administrative work as a director of the Brzezinski Institute, there are these common themes, working towards mutual coexistence between America and the rest of the world, trying to have better understanding between Islam and the West, and also work towards social justice, where we can focus on common issues such as hunger and try to alleviate some of the world's most pressing problems. Thanks once again for listening to the Islamic Mary podcast. I would encourage you to order my book. I just got opportunity to get my author copies. I posted that on social media, some of the pictures. It's really amazing and surreal to actually hold the book in my hands after working on it digitally for so many years. I want to thank all those who helped and supported, and even the small words of encouragement went a long way. I also want to encourage you to subscribe to this podcast. It's available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. Encourage your friends, students, and colleagues to listen to this podcast. I have a colleague who's teaching this fall, and she's actually using some of the episodes in her classes. You can always text me your thoughts, comments, and feedback. I love hearing from listeners and their reflections and where to take the show. And you can also leave a review of this podcast. I have happy to see that there's several reviews already and people sending their words of well wishes and encouragement. And last, you can visit my website and join my newsletter, where I'll be updating folks on the publication of the Islamic Mary. Also be giving some free giveaways of the book through the listserv, and there's a quiz that you can take regarding the Islamic Mary and test your knowledge about what you know about her. Thanks once again, and take care.